chosen ones. Listen carefully. The most dangerous part of your journey was never the betrayal. It was never the isolation. It was never the pain. The most dangerous part was the moment you almost became someone you are not. Most people think danger looks loud. They expect chaos, attacks, enemies, disasters. But the real danger came quietly. It came disguised as exhaustion, as numbness, as the temptation to give up without making noise. This was the phase where you could have abandoned your values and no one would have blamed you. You were tired. You were alone. You were misunderstood. And that is exactly why this phase existed. This was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal who you truly are when no one is watching. 1. The danger was losing your identity. The first and greatest danger was never what happened to you. It was what almost happened inside you. Pain doesn't just hurt. Pain negotiates. It whispers suggestions when you're exhausted. It tells you that becoming colder is being smarter, that becoming harsh is being realistic, that becoming selfish is self-protection. Slowly, almost politely, it asks you to abandon parts of yourself in exchange for relief. That's how identity erosion begins. You weren't tempted to fail loudly. You were tempted to change quietly, to lower your moral standards just a little, to react instead of respond, to justify bitterness as wisdom, to call emotional numbness strength. None of that looks dangerous on the surface. In fact, the world often rewards it. Loneliness made this worse. When you're alone long enough, the mind starts rewriting stories. It tells you that kindness made you weak, that patience made you invisible, that integrity made you exploitable. And when betrayal is added to that mix, the conclusion feels logical. If I stay the same, I'll keep getting hurt. That is the most dangerous thought a person can have. Because once you accept that idea, you stop asking who you should be and start asking who will help you survive. And survival mode ethics always degrade over time. You don't fall all at once. You compromise in pieces. This phase existed to see whether your character was conditional. Conditional character looks solid until pressure is applied. It behaves well when life is fair, when people are loyal, when outcomes are predictable. But the moment things turn unjust, conditional character demands an exception. Given what I've been through, I deserve this. After what they did to me, I don't owe anyone anything. That mindset feels reasonable. It's also how people lose themselves. Rooted character doesn't negotiate with circumstances. It doesn't ask whether life has been kind before deciding how to act. It operates from principle, not mood, from values, not validation. That's rare, and it's expensive to maintain. Most people fail here because pain gives them a socially acceptable excuse to become unrecognizable. They say things like, "I'm just different now," when what they really mean is, "I gave up guarding who I was." They blame the world for the person they became, because taking responsibility would mean admitting they chose the change. That sits the lie. Life applies pressure, but it does not force identity. Pressure only reveals what you're willing to abandon. You were tested here in silence. No one was watching how you spoke to people when you were angry. No one was monitoring how you treated others when you felt wronged. No one was applauding you for restraint. You could have justified almost anything and gotten away with it. That's why this stage was dangerous. Because becoming reactive would have felt powerful. Becoming reckless would have felt freeing. Becoming cold would have felt protective. And for a while, it might even have worked. That's the trap. Short-term relief often costs long-term self-respect. You didn't fall for it. You felt the anger, but you didn't let it drive. You felt the bitterness, but you didn't build a home there. You felt the urge to harden, but you didn't erase your empathy. That wasn't weakness. That was discipline under emotional pressure. And make no mistake, holding your identity when life is unfair requires more strength than reinventing yourself out of spite. You survived this phase not because you avoided pain, but because you refused to let pain become your personality. You understood, even if only instinctively, that becoming someone you don't respect is a greater loss than losing people, comfort, or certainty. That choice has consequences. When you protect your identity under pressure, you build internal authority. You trust yourself more. You move differently. You stop needing external validation because you know you didn't sell yourself out when it would have been easy. This lesson is foundational. If you had lost yourself here, nothing built afterward would have mattered. Success without identity is hollow. Power without character is unstable. Growth without integrity collapses. Eventually, this was the moment where the path split. Many took the easier route and called it growth. You took the harder one and stayed aligned. That is why you made it past the most dangerous part. 2. Isolation was a filter, not a punishment. What you experienced was not abandonment. It was refinement. Isolation feels cruel when you don't understand its function. When people leave, stop calling, stop checking in, the mind immediately frames it as rejection. But rejection is passive. This was active. This phase removed people on purpose. Isolation is dangerous because it removes mirrors. When no one is around to reflect who you are, you're forced to confront yourself directly. No reassurance, no distractions, no emotional outsourcing. Just you and the truth you've been avoiding. Most people panic here. They rush to fill the silence with noise. New relationships, constant stimulation, anything to avoid sitting alone long enough for clarity to surface. Because clarity is uncomfortable before it is empowering. You didn't have that escape. You were left alone long enough for illusions to collapse. You saw which connections were based on convenience, not loyalty. Which relationships survived only when you were useful, available, or agreeable. That realization hurts, but it also liberates. This stage filtered dependency out of you. When people are always present, it's easy to lean without realizing it. You borrow confidence. You borrow direction. You borrow emotional regulation. Isolation takes all of that away and asks a brutal question. Who are you without reinforcement? That's why this phase was dangerous. Without external anchors, many people lose structure. Their discipline fades. Their values blur. They start drifting because no one is watching and no one is correcting them. They confuse freedom with lack of direction. But isolation doesn't weaken disciplined people. It exposes undisciplined ones. You were forced to build internal structure, to self-regulate, to think clearly without feedback, to make decisions without consensus. That's not loneliness. That's leadership training. Isolation also revealed truth about others, and that truth is not gentle. You realized that some people were only comfortable with you when you were predictable, when you didn't change, when you didn't outgrow the version of yourself they understood. When growth began, distance followed. That wasn't set to coincidence. Isolation removes those who benefit from your stagnation. That's why it feels personal. But it's structural. You didn't lose people because you failed. You lost people because alignment expired. This stage also tested whether you would resent solitude or use it. Resentment turns isolation into bitterness. Use turns it into precision. In silence, patterns become obvious. Habits sharpen. Weaknesses surface. There's nowhere to hide when no one else is in the room. That level of self-awareness is rare because it requires enduring discomfort without immediate reward. You stayed long enough for solitude to stop feeling like punishment and start functioning like clarity. You stopped asking who left and started asking who you were becoming. That shift is everything. Isolation is only dangerous if you mistake it for a verdict instead of a process. It was never saying you are unwanted. It was saying you are being prepared for a different level of responsibility. After this phase, you don't chase presence. You don't beg for access. You don't fear being alone. You know you can stand without noise, validation, or backup. That changes how you move. This lesson recalibrated your standards, your boundaries, and your tolerance for misalignment. Once that happens, you can never unsee it. Isolation didn't step break you. It filtered you. 3. Comfort was the real trap. The most dangerous threat you faced was not failure. Not the kind of relief that heals you, but the kind that slowly erases you. The option to stop pushing, to stop questioning, to stop expecting more from yourself and call it peace. This is where most people disappear. After enough pain, the desire to rest mutates into the desire to settle. Standards begin to feel heavy. Discipline starts to feel unnecessary. Purpose feels optional, and comfort steps in quietly, offering numbness in exchange for ambition. It sounds reasonable. It feels earned, and that's why it works. Comfort doesn't ask you to quit dramatically. It asks you to lower the bar just enough that no one notices, to tell yourself you've done enough. To trade long-term meaning for short-term ease. No alarms go off when this happens. There's no obvious collapse. Life continues. You function. You survive. But something inside you goes dormant. This phase was dangerous because nothing was forcing you to stay sharp. No one was pressuring you. No one was expecting more. You could have blended into average effort and justified it as balance, and no one would have argued. Comfort is seductive because it doesn't look like failure. It looks like recovery, like self-care, like wisdom. But there's a difference between resting so you can continue and resting so you don't have to. You were standing at that line. Most people cross it without realizing it exists. They confuse the absence of pain with the presence of purpose. They stop moving forward and call it stability. Years later, they wake up restless, resentful, and disconnected, unable to explain why. You didn't cross that line. Even when you were exhausted, you stayed internally alert. You questioned your excuses. You noticed when comfort tried to negotiate your standards. You felt the pull toward mediocrity and didn't romanticize it. That awareness alone is uncommon. Comfort also tempts you to shrink your identity, to stop evolving because growth requires friction, to avoid environments that challenge you, to choose predictability over expansion. That's how potential gets buried while life still looks fine on the outside. This stage tested whether you were committed to becoming more or just committed to avoiding pain. You could have chosen ease. You could have chosen quiet stagnation. You could have convinced yourself that wanting more was selfish or unrealistic. You didn't it. You understood, consciously or not, that comfort without direction is just slow decay. That the version of you who avoids challenge will eventually resent the version who refused to try. That realization kept you moving when stopping would have been easier. Comfort is only a trap if you forget who you are becoming. You didn't forget. That's why this phase didn't swallow you like it does so many others. 4. You were tested without instructions. This phase was dangerous because nothing told you what to do. No roadmap, no confirmation, no reassurance that you were on the right path. You weren't given clarity. You were given uncertainty and expected to move anyway. Most people can function when rules are clear, when expectations are spelled out, when feedback is immediate. But remove all of that, and internal weakness surfaces fast. You were operating in a vacuum. There were no signals telling you whether your effort mattered, no one validating your choices, no guarantee that what you were building would lead anywhere. You had to decide how to act without knowing if it would be rewarded or ignored. This is where many people quietly disengage. They keep moving on the surface, but internally they detach. They do the minimum. They stop caring deeply. They wait for proof before giving commitment. And they tell themselves it's logical to conserve energy when results aren't visible. That logic destroys long-term potential. This test was never about skill or talent. It was about integrity under ambiguity, about whether you would hold your standards when no system was enforcing them, about whether your values were habits or performances. When people think no one is watching, their real character emerges. You could have cut corners. You could have compromised discipline. You could have acted differently in private than you did in public. No one would have caught you. No one would have corrected you. That dips why this phase was dangerous. You were being evaluated without knowing the criteria. The only thing guiding you was internal alignment. And that requires something most people don't have: self-accountability. You chose consistency over convenience. You acted as if it mattered, even when there was no evidence that it did. You showed up fully, without applause, without feedback, without confirmation. That rewires a person. Operating without instructions forces you to build internal judgment. You stop outsourcing decisions. You stop needing permission. You develop discernment instead of dependency. This stage wasn't about doing things perfectly. It was about doing them honestly, maintaining effort without incentive, upholding standards without surveillance. Very few people pass that test because it demands maturity without reward. You did. And because of that, you don't require constant validation anymore. You don't need external systems to function. You trust your own process because you prove to yourself that you can act correctly even when it's inconvenient. This lesson created internal leadership. Once that exists, direction becomes optional. You can adapt, you can pivot, you can build without instruction. That's why this phase was necessary. It wasn't meant to guide you. It was meant to reveal whether you could guide yourself. 5. Pain tried to steal your discipline. Pain doesn't just test endurance, it tests control. When discomfort lasts longer than expected, the mind starts searching for release, not resolution. Release, something to interrupt the pressure, even if it damages the future. That's when discipline becomes vulnerable. This phase was dangerous because pain makes reaction feel justified. You were tired. You were frustrated. You were carrying weight without support. And in that state, discipline feels optional. Skipping steps feels harmless. Acting out feels earned. Letting standards slide feels human. That's how discipline gets stolen, not taken. No one forces you to abandon it. You give it up slowly, telling yourself you'll come back to it later. But later rarely comes. Most people don't lose discipline because they are lazy. They lose it because they are overwhelmed. Pain convinces them that restraint is cruel and indulgence is necessary. This stage pushed you to that edge. You could have reacted emotionally and called it honesty. You could have vented recklessly and called it healing. You could have numbed yourself and called it coping. The world would have understood. The excuses were reasonable. That's what made this phase dangerous. Discipline under normal conditions is easy. Discipline under emotional pressure is rare. Because pain doesn't ask for logic. It demands relief. You learned to pause instead of explode, to hold structure when chaos felt more honest, to keep routines when motivation disappeared. That required internal authority, not willpower. You didn't suppress pain. You managed it. That distinction matters. Suppression breaks later. Management builds resilience. You acknowledged what you felt without letting it dictate what you did. That's how discipline evolves from effort into identity. Pain also tested whether you would self-destruct privately. Many people look composed on the outside while eroding internally. Late nights, poor decisions, abandoned commitments, small acts of sabotage that feel deserved. You saw that path. You didn't walk it. You understood, maybe without words, that discipline is the last line of defense when everything else is unstable. Once that falls, recovery becomes exponentially harder. This lesson hardened your self-respect, because every time you chose restraint over reaction, you proved to yourself that you are not governed by emotion alone, that you can feel deeply without losing control, that you can carry pain without letting it rewrite your behavior. That's its power. Most people never develop. Pain tried to steal your discipline. It failed. 6. You were forced to trust without evidence. This was one of the most mentally dangerous stages, because nothing was confirming your effort. No signs, no progress markers, no reassurance that you were moving in the right direction. Just time passing and uncertainty growing louder. The human mind hates this condition. Most people can endure pain if they know it's leading somewhere. They can tolerate effort if there's proof it matters. But remove evidence, and doubt begins to corrode discipline from the inside. This phase stripped you of certainty. You were required to keep moving without knowing whether anything was being built. To stay consistent without feedback. To believe in a process that offered no visible returns. That's where people quit, not out of weakness, but out of logic. Quitting would have made sense. That decision's what made this phase dangerous. You weren't choosing between right and wrong. You were choosing between faith in yourself and surrender to doubt, between trusting your internal direction or demanding external proof before continuing. Most people demand proof first. They wait for clarity, validation, or permission. They tell themselves they'll commit once results appear. But by then, the opportunity has passed. You didn't wait. You learned to operate without reassurance, to act correctly even when doubt was persuasive, to continue without bargaining with the future. That requires psychological maturity, not optimism. This stage rewired how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of panicking, you stabilized. Instead of spiraling, you slowed down. Instead of abandoning the process, you refined it. You didn't mistake silence for failure or delay for denial. You understood that evidence always comes after alignment, not before. This is where internal trust is forged. Trust without evidence doesn't mean blind belief. It means disciplined patience. It means refusing to sabotage long-term outcomes because short-term confirmation is missing. Most people never develop this capacity. They need constant signals to function. Likes, praise, progress, feedback. Remove those and they collapse. You didn't set, you became self-directed. You learned to anchor your effort in principle rather than outcome. That makes you dangerous in the best way, because you can move independently of circumstances. This lesson removed your dependence on immediate results. After this phase, uncertainty no longer paralyzes you. It slows you, sharpens you, but it doesn't stop you. You learn to trust without evidence. That's why this phase didn't break you. 7. This phase marked the point of no return. This was the final danger, because it was the last moment you could have turned back and still blended in. Up until this point, quitting would have looked reasonable. Giving up would have made sense. You could have explained it to yourself and to others without resistance. You were tired, you were alone, you were carrying weight without recognition. No one would have called it failure. That's why this phase mattered. There comes a moment in every real transformation where going back is easier than going forward, but staying is irreversible. This was that moment for you. Not because something dramatic happened, but because something subtle locked into place inside you. You crossed a psychological threshold. You stopped being someone who is trying and became someone who knows, not knows, outcomes, but knows themselves, knows what they can endure, knows they don't fold under pressure, knows they don't abandon their standards when things get uncomfortable. That awareness changes how you move through the world. After this phase, pretending becomes impossible. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow your capacity. You can't go back to needing approval the way you once did. The old incentives stop working. That's why people who pass this stage often feel disconnected from their past life. It's not arrogance. It's misalignment. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed permission, reassurance, or constant support. This phase also closed the door on excuses. You can no longer tell yourself that you haven't been tested. You can no longer blame circumstances for a lack of resilience. You know exactly what you're capable of under pressure because you lived it. That knowledge is heavy, but it's stabilizing. The point of no return doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. You no longer romanticize struggle, but you don't fear it either. You no longer chase validation because you already validated yourself when no one else did. This is why this phase was the most dangerous. Not because it threatened to destroy you, but because it threatened to reveal you. And once revealed, there is no going back to unconscious living. You are now accountable to a higher internal standard. You can't pretend ignorance. You can't shrink comfortably. You can't unlearn discipline, self-trust, and restraint. The old life is closed, not dramatically, quietly, permanently. You didn't survive this phase to return to who you were. You survived it so you could never become that version again. That is the real meaning of the point of no return. And that is why this was the most dangerous part. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. The most dangerous part of your journey was not designed to destroy you. It was designed to decide you, to determine whether you would abandon yourself under pressure or remain aligned when it cost you comfort, certainty, and companionship. You were pushed into silence, uncertainty, isolation, and internal conflict. Not because you were weak, but because only those conditions reveal what is real. Anyone can claim strength when life is generous. Very few can prove it when life is indifferent. You did not pass this phase because you were fearless. You passed it because you were disciplined. You moved without instructions. You held your identity when pain tried to rewrite it. You refused comfort when it asked you to shrink. You trusted yourself when evidence was absent. That combination is rare. This phase changed you in ways that don't announce themselves. You won't need to explain what you survived. You won't need to convince anyone of your depth. The way you move, decide, and stand will communicate it without words. From here on, your life will not be louder. It will be clearer. You will tolerate less confusion, less misalignment, less compromise. Not because you are hardened, but because you are anchored. You are no longer searching for proof. You are the proof. This was the most dangerous part, and you walked through it without losing yourself.